Okay, like we were saying that we're starting the Masechta Baba Basra. The beginning of the chapter is going to be talking about regarding building a wall or splitting a property when two people they share a chutzner and they agree to split the chutzner. And then we're going to talk about that there's something called hezekriya, and we are forcing them to build a wall in between their property lines. That means to say is you have a 10 by 10, you get 5 feet, I get 5 feet, but we have to put a wall in between or not. That's what the chapter is going to start off with, of hezekriya, not hezekriya. So let's first begin with hashutfin. Sheratzu lasois mechitza bechatzer. You have two partners. They would like to build a mechitza in their yard. The halach is boinin es hakaisel be'emtza. We build a wall in between the properties. Makom shenahagu live nice. Gvil, in a place we're going to see, the Gemara is going to talk about what type of stones they are. If you look in the R scroll, I think they quote it as, let's see what the R scroll quotes, Gvil. Gvil they quoted as rough edge stones. So we're going to see that rough edge stones is shaped a little differently, and we're going to need either more or less on the bottom, how thick the stones are going to be. So malkum shenagu live nice gvil. If the place is that they use such stones to build walls, it's rough edge, or guzes, which is much smoother of a type of stone. A kfisin means a half-size brick, or a whole-size brick, levain and bainin. That means to say is you must build with the material that is the custom to build. Which the Gemara is going to talk about the ramifications. The Mishnah is actually going to talk about the ramifications of the difference in the size of the stones. Now, hakol keminag medina, which is just reiterating the point that everything is based on the local custom. So if the local custom is to build a rough edge stone, that's what you have to build or use those stones. Now, we're going to decide each stone has different measurements that you have to use. Every stone is, some of them are thicker, some of them are thinner. What's the difference? The difference is that we're going to see you have to give not just the bricks, the material for the stone, for the wall, you also have to give land. So we both had a property, and it was 10 by 10. Like that's our case. It's 10 by 10. You take 5 feet, I take 5 feet. Now we're building the wall. The wall is not made out of thin air. Walls have a thickness. Now, depending on the thickness of the wall is going to be dependent how much property I have to give over, right? The thicker the wall, the more property I must basically supply it to go towards the wall. So gvil, if it's constructed with the rough edge stones, the halacha is each one, each partner must give 3 tfachim of land. We're not talking about the material. Material, we know what we're giving. So each to support the wall, right? So when it's a gvil, then it's 3 tfachim, which equals 6 tfachim, because each partner is giving 3. But begazis, if it's with smoother stones, then it's less. Then each one's only giving 2.5. Right? Because gvil has protruding. Makes more sense. If it's protruding, it means there's another half a tefach, which is protruding, which equals up to each one another tefach completely. So by a gvil, it's 6 tefachim. By a gazith, which is a half a tefach less per brick, is only going to be 5 tefachim.
Is it irrespective of how big the chutzner is?
Correct. It does not make a difference if the chutzner is 100 amas or 10 amas, because the wall's a wall. So you're bringing out a good point. Maybe you would think that, oh, come on, I only have 4 amas. If I have to give 3 tfachim, it's much more compared to when I have 100 amas. But here we're talking about the wall. And we're talking about the minhag medina is to use these type of stones. So we have to use those type of stones, unless we're going to see if both partners agree to say, let's not use these. We don't want to spend this much money. Or it's too expensive, or we don't want to spend so much space. The two partners could agree to do a cheaper option. However, this whole mission is referring to when one partner wants to stick to the local custom and the other partner is trying to be cheap. Therefore, because the custom is to use the XYZ type of stone, whether it's the rough edging, whether it's the smooth stones, therefore I have a taina and bezin say we can use those stones that are the minhag medina. However, if both partners would like, it's a free country, they could do whatever they want. If both partners would like to go the cheaper route, they definitely could go with any option they would want. Okay, let's continue the Mishnah. Bikfisin, if the wall is built with half-size bricks. Each one has to give 2 tfachim. Bilevenim, if it's built with whole bricks, because again, those were very small little bricks, and that was the minhag of Medina. Therefore, the Mishnah concludes, lefikach, which means to say is, pardon? Oh, what's the chiddush? We're going to see the Gemara is going to bring out your point. It's of course. What's the lefikach, right? The Gemara is going to ask your point. But right now we're understanding that the lefikach is that even in a later time, many, many, many years later, one of the partners say, wait a second, I built the wall myself. The answer is no. We built it together. Not only that, you had to schlep me to court to build it together. And therefore, because the minhag is XYZ, right? I call minhag Medina, and therefore you forced me to build such a place. And the place, the chiddush over here is, there's no real chiddush of lefikach, because like you're saying, it's of course, right? But even though I'm a muchzik, we're going to see later on in the Masechta, this is note 13, if you look at the art scroll, brings out, what's your name if I can ask?
My name?
Yes.
Mel Cohen. Moshe Simcha Cohen.
Moshe Simcha, right? Moshe Simcha is asking a very good question. Moshe Simcha is asking, what is the chiddush of the Mishnah to tell us that it belongs to you? Who would think otherwise? So note 13 actually brings Moshe Simcha's question, and they answer it that even, we're going to learn later on in the chapter in the Masechta, that you're such a thing called a muchzuk. Muchzuk means that if I'm holding on to something, you can't come over to me and say, where's my money? That money's mine. The halacha is, if I'm holding on to it, there's a concept called ha'maitzi mechaveira olav araya, right? Which means to say, you got to go prove it. So the Mishnah is stating, even though it's in my property, and it's in my rishus, we don't say ha'maitzi mechaveira olav araya because of what the Mishnah states earlier, that you're compelled to build together with your partner. Does that answer your question, Moshe Simcha? Okay, let's continue on. V'chein beginan. Similarly, regarding a gina, we're going to see the Gemara. We're going to see later on in the Gemara. The gina is a little different with hezek riyah, but same thing with a garden. Earlier we were talking about grain field. Now we're talking about a vegetable field. Makoim shenahagu ligdar. If it's a place where it's accustomed to put on partitions, then mechayevin oisai. We obligate you. Avo bibika. However, regarding a valley which is containing fields of grain, makom shenagu sheloi legdar ein mechayvin oisai. There it's the opposite way around. When by a gina, it's only when the custom is to build, you could compel me. Mashe'im kain. By a valley, we say makom shenagu sheloi legdar. However, we're going to make a diak, I think, in the Gemara, hastama. There's such a concept. The Gemara tells me, the Mishnah is telling me only in the place where it's not obligated, right? That's when I'm not compelled, it sounds like. But if there's no direction either way, I am compelled. We'll see that in the Gemara. Elim writes, kindness the Gemara's Mishnah is saying in a case, what happens in a place where there is no minhag, and one of the partners says, I want to build it. Because I'm a private guy, I want to do it. I have the money for it. I have the means. I want to do it. The halacha is, he goes into his property line. Again, there's no real chiddush with that, right? Because just pointing out that I don't have to give you the land. You want to build, no problem. Enjoy your land. However, the Gemara, we're going to go in depth. What is this chazis and why we do it outside? So I think they might even have, let's see if the Perish Chai brings down a chazis. What's happening is, this is the gazis. It's the smooth stone. This is the grains. Let's see if they have hutzav daf. No, they don't. Maybe they do. Ooh, gazis. Chazis.
Is that available?
Pardon me? I can leave this here if you guys would want to look.
I want to know if it's available at
Local stores, they all carry this. Yes, this is basically, I don't know if you ever heard of this. This is called a Perish Chai on Baba Basra. You heard of it? You all have heard of it?
Yeah.
Right? So it's a book that has all the, little drawings, pictures to really get a better clarity of what's going on, especially in Chulin, right? Yes. So we're going to see that you build a wall and you build the chazes, which is a little piece of wood, on the outside. We're going to see why not on the inside. The Gemara is going to talk about it. We're going to get much more in depth why we build the chazes on the outside. Lefikach, therefore, since I already built such a thing with my own resources, im nafal hakaiso, hamakoy vehavanim shalai. Even if the neighbor suddenly wakes up and tries complaining and says that we built it together, he's not believed. Because there's a chazes. Chazes, which you're going to see, is a raya to tell me I built it myself. What happens in Masumidas Sheneyem? They want to build it by mutually consenting, which means we both agree to build it. Bainin, as we're almost towards the end of the Mishnah. What's your name? If I can ask.
Moshe.
Oh, so we have Moshe Simcha, and yours?
Moshe Meir.
So Moshe Meir, Chaim, Moshe Simcha, and Yaakov. Okay. And I'm Yehuda.
You're a
Rabbi. Okay. So if, however, they both agreed with mutually, we build it like we said with the Mishnah, with all the necessary materials and everything. And the Mishnah tells us a very fascinating point, that we both build a chazis. Chazis is this a little erection, this little piece. We both do it. Maybe you would ask the question, let's just not build it, any of them. Why each one has to build one? Again, the Gemara is going to bring out all these points and we're going to clarify why each one builds a chazis. Right? If you think about it, let's not build, why spend extra money for each side to build a chazis? Makes more sense not to build a chazis at all. So the Gemara is going to talk about it. Lefikach, therefore, nafal hakaisel hamakim v'havanim shel shenei. Again, Moshe Simcha could ask again the same. Moshe Simcha?
Yeah.
Could ask.
No, you call me Mel.
Mel could ask the same point. Is what is really the chiddush of lefikach? So we're going to see this. Let's jump right into the Gemara. Now, before we go into the Gemara, which is the reason why I want to give a little akdama, is because the next part of the Gemara is going to go till the next daf, Lishna Achrina, top of the Amud. So what we're going to want to go through, this is quite a fascinating Gemara. It's going to go through basically what is the terminology in the Mishnah when it says Hashutlin Shiratzu Lasis Mechitza. They want to build a what? What is the word Mechitza? I can give you two options, and this is what the Gemara's options are. Does Mechitza mean a partition? A wall, which means a partition means just like we have everywhere. It's a real wall. That's how we teach it today. When the guy says, we're going to Simcha, we need to put up the Mechitza. We call that a partition. However, we're going to find that there are other times, Mechitza doesn't mean partition. Mechitza means split. Chetzi lachem, we have, right? You take half, I take half. So the question we're going to try to get to find out is when the Mishnah is telling us how Rishut and Shiratzu Lasim Mechitza, it doesn't mean they want to build a wall or they want to divide their property. And we're going to see the ramifications in a few moments. What is the difference of the taich word? So let's dive right into it. Now the Gemara wants to understand, Savura, the Rabbanon understood that my mechitza, what is the definition of the word mechitza? Guda. What we call today, we're starting the Gemara, what we call today a wall. And the Gemara wants to bring a raya to this. Kidetanya. So also we're going to have to give agdama to kalayim. There's such a thing called kilei hakarim. What's kilei hakarim? Means to say is you have a field of grain and you have a field of a vineyard. The halach is if they merge and they grow together, it's asr ba'ana. You have to burn it. It is totally worthless. Now, what happens is when there's two people, we're not partners, we're neighbors. There's also an issue of kalai. So the halacha is there's a grain field and then there's a vineyard. It has to be 4 amas in between. Now the reason I think it needs to be 4 amas is because in order for the animals, which we're going to see way deeper in the Masechta, needs to work back, forth, going near, needs to have like a path to do the work on the side of the fields, and it needs at least 4 amas. However, there's a loophole. You know when you don't need 4 amas? When there's a wall. If there's a real wall in between, a real barrier, then there's no need of 4 amas, and there's no halacha kalayim, even though they're right near each other within a few tefachim. Why? Because there's a beautiful partition going through. Now, what gets sticky, which we're going to start over here, is what happens when the full wall falls down. This is what we're getting into. So let's see it. Kedetanya, mechitzas hakaram shenifritza. Now it was breached or it fell down completely. The halacha is, if you don't quickly build it, you're going to have an issue of kalayim. Because there's no dalad amas, like we said. It's only when it's up the barrier. So the Aimer loy gedar. Now the question is, who is saying it? They bring down, is it the Bezdin is giving the warning? Or it's the Baal HaSada who's giving the warning? But apparently it's the issue of the Baal HaVineyard. The vineyard has to repair it, not the Baal HaSada. And I think the reason is because the grains grow straight. Vineyards, I think, could, if you don't take care of it, it spreads. So the responsibility goes on to the owner of the vineyard. Now, so the owner of the field tells him, build it, fix it up, because otherwise we're going to have an issue of kalayim. So he puts it up, he rebuilds the wall, then it fell again. What happened was, the owner of the vineyard said, I give up. I'm leaving town. You deal with it on your own. What's that mean? It means to say is the second the owner leaves, Rashi says it has to grow, and then the grains grow. How much do they grow? They grow a 200th. It's ready in Hilchos Kalayim. That once it grows in 200th, we have a din of Kalayim. The reason why it's a din of Kalayim, because there's no separation. However, the halacha is, I raise a kiddush. Now kiddush, they bring down, it's very interesting, they bring down a note 3. You can say it outside. Kiddush usually means holy. So what's it mean over here, kiddush? Kiddush over here means gone, really. You have to burn it. So we find kiddush could also mean tista'ev, the note 3 brings down, which means it becomes unfit. It's right now, it's like even the same thing when one person is too holy, you can't go nowhere. We have a word, Kaidish HaKadoshim. Most, right? Only the Kohen Gadol could go in. Kiddush is in a higher sense of that we can't, it's unfit for everyone else. However, what are we pointing out in this Mishnah? We're pointing, from this, is it a Mishnah? It is Kedetanya. It's actually a Brisa. However, what we're trying to bring a raya, is that it's a wall. We clearly see mechitzas hakerem, right? Shenifritza, aimer legadar. What are we calling a mechitza? We clearly see, if anything over here, a raya that the word mechitza means a wall. So we brought a very good proof. It means a wall and not just a division. Now, what's the implications of whether it's a wall or division? The Gemara says the implication will be as follows. Taima deratzu. The only reason the Bezdin can force you and compel you to build a wall is because we agreed to erect such a structure. What's your question?
No, you're saying right.
Oh, right. I think you said why. Okay. Halai ratzu ein mechayvin oisai. Which means to say is the only reason, right? It's very clearly, according to this, the way we're teaching the Mishnah, it says, Hashotvin sheratzu lasets mechitza. That means we both agreed to build the wall. But we didn't want to build a wall. That means we decided to split the property, and I'm saying, I'm not willing to build a wall. The halacha, it's meduyik. I don't have to build a wall. You can't compel me to spend money for a wall. So what do we see from there? If you can't compel me to spend money from a wall, does that show me the concept of hezek riyah? Is it damaging or not damaging? Hezek riyah shmei hezek means that if we can see each other doing each other's stuff, right? Today, there's such a thing called the First Amendment in Constitution. There's freedom of press, freedom of everything. Is as long as your eyes can see, based on the Constitution, there's no such a thing called hezek riyah. Do we know that? In America, there's no such thing as hezek riyah. As long as your eyes can see, you can take a video. As long as you're in public property. But in Judaism, we have more of a concept not like that. That's what we're trying to figure out. Is it considered hezek riyah, shmei hezek, which is considered damage, therefore you compel the wall. So if anything, we're bringing a raya that it's not hezek riyah. Because otherwise, you would have to build a wall the second you divide the property. Right? Is everyone fine with this beautiful proof of the Gemara that we see that hezek riyah lav shmei hezek? Because otherwise you'd have to build a wall. The Mishnah says you don't have to build a wall. It's only because we agreed to build a wall. Right? Time of the ratzu, halai ratzu. If they didn't want to build a wall, mechayv and isai, alma hezek riyah lav shmei hezek. Okay, so far we brought a raya that it's not hezek. Let's continue the other alternative. The aim of my mechitza, pelukta. Let's try to say that a mechitza does not mean a partition, rather means a division. just like splitting the pot, splitting up everything. Kidduchsiv, we're going to bring a ride to this. Vatihi mechatzas ha'eda. We find this in the Torah, Pasuk in Bamidbar and Lamed Al. We're talking about when they were splitting up the spoils, the division of spoils after Klal Yisrael was very successful against the Midyanim. We were able to kill many people. They were talking about 337,500, people that had so much loot to split. And it was very clearly over there, mechsas means division. And therefore, it's a diak. How would you read the Mishnah going this way? Hashot v'nsheratu lasses mechitza. Partners that want to what? Not build a wall. Split the property. Bainin as a kaisel. You are compelled to build a wall. So what do we see from there? The second we agree to split a property, are we obligated to build a wall? Yes. And if we're obligated to build a wall, that means it's such a thing called hezek riyah. So now we have basically we're trying to say this is the implications of how we understand if it means mechitza, which means a partition, or it means a guda, which means a partition, or it means a division, palukta, and therefore that will be the implication. Okay, now the Gemara is going to try to object and try to come out with the, how we could see which one is the right one. If it's true that mechitza is a division, the Gemara is questioning the words of the Mishnah. The words of the Mishnah is shiratzu lasis mechitza. That's a very interesting way of talking. You don't need to just explain yourself so well. Lasis mechitza, it's partners that would like to make a division. Shiratzu lachtzais, they want to split it up. That's a better terminology for the Gemara. If that's really true, then mechitza means partition. For the Gemara, I have a counterattack. Elamai, you're going to tell me means guda, just means a wall? Why does it say bainis akaisel, bainin aisim ivayile? If we look back in the Mishnah, let's just remember these. The first words of the Mishnah was hashutim shiratu lasis mechitza. Two parties, they want to build mechitza. We don't know that terminology. Bainis akaisel. So frak the Gemara, you're telling me that mechitza means a wall. So let's touch it up in English. Let's translate it. Partners that would like to build a partition in the yard, they build a partition. Do we understand now it's repetitive? That's the Gemara's question. If you're telling me mechitza means a partition, then you're being very repetitive when you look at the Mishnah. Because the first statement in the Mishnah is partners that would like to build a partition, they build a partition. We clearly see that it's a double terminology in fact the Gemara that doesn't. That's why the Gemara counterattacks with don't try to come and use the terminology and the words to learn each way, because each way has its issues. Elamai. So Gemara resolves this. No. The Gemara answers, no, I can answer that point. Because the way I would read the Gemara is, partners, when we type it up in English, we'll see how it's much easier to, with the flow. Partners that would like to build a partition, they must build a wall. What is a partition? Partition could mean anything. We're going to see in the Gemara. We're going to learn. Here, our Mishnah clearly told us, what do we need to do? We need to use, depending on the custom, either thick bricks, protruding bricks, smooth planks. But we must build a very strong wall, erection, a very strong erection, not just a, little boundary markers. Today, when you call 811, they put a little flags, right? We're not talking about little cones that they have outside when they're doing currently the strip, lines. They put just cones to show you the partition. So therefore, it makes sense to say hashut and shiratu lasses mechitza. The partners that would love to build a partition must build a wall, which means a very strong wall. Okay, we are up to the two dots. Let's continue. Bainin es akaisel ba'emtza. Where do we build the wall? We build it in the middle. Frak the Gemara, pshita. Where else do you want me to build it? Why in the world would we not build it in between our properties? That means to say, now that we're splitting the properties, let's picture this is partner A, this is partner B, we split it. Why in the world would we not put the wall up smack in the middle? Why should I put it on one side versus the other? We're agreeing jointly to split the property. Fam, for the Gemara answers, lights richa. What's the scenario where you have to build it in the middle? They call them chad, v'ratzi lechavre. One of them approached his friend, and he committed himself to divide the property with a partition, and the other person just also agreed, but he mao the tema. Matzi amarle. Ki isratzi loch ba'avira. I only agreed regarding giving you my space, which means now that I have a partition, I can't see the view. Let's say you had a beautiful view towards the ocean, but now there's a partition, I lost that view. I agreed for you to put up a partition. I never agreed for you to take some of my land, especially in a scenario like Moshe is saying, in a case where there is very, very little space. I don't want to give up a few precious tfachim for your wall. So, what I agreed to you is only for the view. I never agreed to give you the land. Kamash Malon, the Mishnah is saying that when you agree, when a person, your partner, or your neighbor approaches you to split up it's really a partner, they agree to split up the property, and you're committing to a wall, to build a wall, you're additionally committing to build the land. Unless you could always stipulate otherwise. If you want, you can write a contract, I'm not willing to give you the land. If, however, on a case where there was no communication, and I agreed to build a partition, I'm obligating myself to give up the land. Okay, now the Gemara is going to go through back to Hezek Ria Lav Shemei Hezek. The Gemara is about to try to bring 6 different proofs that Hezek Ria is not considered damage. And if you look into parentheses, they bring a siman. And the reason why they bring a siman, because back in the day, they didn't have what today we have Gemaras, we have Art Scroll, we have everything printed. They were working everything with simanim balpeh. They wanted to remember it. So the Gemara brings down 6 different simanim: a gina, a kaisel, a kaifin that we force you, we compel you, the chalkin we divide it, and chalainois and the Rav Nachman. Okay, we're now going to go through all these 6 rayas, and then we're going to stop at the end of the Amud. All these 6 rayas is going to try to bring a raya Hezek Ria Lashme Hezek. Okay, let's jump right into it. Tashma. Let's bring a raya. The Hezek Ria is Lav Shmei Hezek. Why? Because it says V'chein Begina. Now in a scenario of Begina, it's very clearly, the Mishnah says, right, that you must build, according to the custom, you must build a beautiful wall. And then the Gemara, the Mishnah, the end of the Mishnah fears ice, and additionally by the garden. Now why by the garden do I have to build a wall? Elamai, the reason why you have to build by a garden a wall, because it's damaging Hezek Ria, is considered a real Hezek. The Gemara answers, no, Gina Shani Keder Abba, which means a garden is different, like Rab Abba said in a statement. What was Rab Abba's statement? The Amar Rab Abba, Amar of Hunan, the name of Rab, Amar Rab, Asala Adam Lamaid Bistei Chaver, is forbidden for a person to stand in his friend's field. Bisha'a Shihiyamedis B'Kaimisel, during its standing crops. Why? Because you get very jealous. You see he's very successful. And there's such a thing called Ayin Hara. This is the sugya of Ayin Hara. This is what Hezek Ria. Therefore, you must build a wall. However, by a grain field, if we look at note 22, grain field is a little different than a vegetable field. Why? A vegetable garden. Because vegetables, they continue throughout the year to sprout. So it's a constant Ayin Hara going on. Masha'im Kain, in a case of a grain field, there's only a very small, brief period where there's beautiful grain cropping. Therefore, they were not going to compel you to build a wall. So therefore, we want to say it's not a riot to say Hezek Ria, Lav Shmei Hezek. There, it's dafka in a garden where there's a continuously attracting attention. Okay. So if anything, I'm thinking right now that we do agree to the concept of Ayin Hara. No one's going to argue, it sounds like, the Gemara is even agreeing, that if there is, for whatever reason, a true Ayin Hara completely at all times, then we agree that Hezek Ria Shmei Hezek. It sounds like we're only questioning if a person could just start up and saying, oh, I don't want you to look at me. But we're not arguing if, for whatever reason, I think we're going to see even in future rayas, that the concept of Hezek Ria is real. Some people want to say there's no such thing as Ayin Hara, right? People say that, I don't believe in Ayin Hara. We clearly see from our Gemara today that there is such a concept called Ayin Hara, and it's real. And we could even force you to build a partition in scenarios where the ayin hara is always. The only Gemara, the only complication, the only arguments in our Gemara, I'm thinking this all now, I'm not 100% correct, I'm thinking this as we're going through the Raya, that the only arguments really becoming is what do we say in a regular scenario? How powerful is the statement of forcing you, oh, I don't want you to look at me. All right, Frek the Gemara, V'ha v'chein ktani. The Gemara, the Mishnah says, V'chein begina. V'chein means and. Similarly, X, Y, Z. Now, by a case of a grain, we're trying to differentiate the case of grain and a garden. By a grain, we're saying that's it's only a brief time during the year, therefore you're not obligated. Masha'im kain. By a garden, which is always you are obligated. Frek the Gemara, V'chein is mashma, implies that they both have equal standing. So just like by a garden, and just like by a grain field, they both need a partition. So you clearly see visual is an issue, visual trespassing. Fan for the Gemara, no, you know what the v'chein is going on? It's going on something else. Agvil ve'agazis. It's going on to tell you that both the partition by a grain field and by a vegetable, so too by a vegetables, by a garden, they both have the same measurements and obligations for the type of material getting built. Okay, the Gemara is going to try to bring another raya. We're up to raya number 2. Tashma, kaisel chatzah shenafal, mechayvin oised livnois ad dalet amas. The Gemara clearly says, the Gemara is questioning the case that you clearly see. The Gemara talks about it, the following Mishnah, which you're going to see in Hayam at Aleph. It says that if you have a wall and it fell down, we obligate both you and your neighbor now, he's not your partner anymore, to rebuild the wall up to 4 amas. Now the chiddush over there is, we're going to see that you only have to build it 4 amas and not 8 amas or 12 amas. It means to say is,
Let me share now.
yeah, definitely.
It's approximately 7.5 feet. This measurement is sufficient to protect against ayin hara, which exceeds the height of most individuals at that time.
Right.
In other words, it has to do with the height of people.
Right. 7.5 feet is quite high, unless you're an NBA player. The typical person, 7.5 feet partition is more than enough. Like even in high security places, they only do 8 feet, fences. Typical fence when you go outside your house is 6 feet. Lower end is 4 feet. Pardon? Right, the Taisus and later on. Taisus and Shabbos and Taisus also in Kufam base. But yeah, so how much are they building it? They're building around 7 to 7.5 feet. However, we clearly see the Gemara's understanding. We see that there's obligation to rebuild the wall, even though I don't want to build the wall. So you see the visual trespass is real. Mar answers no, nafal shani. It means to say is, there's no raya. It's very possible that we both agreed whether we were obligated or not to build a wall. 20 years ago, we were both happy. Said, you know what, I want to do private stuff in my yard. You want to do, I don't feel comfortable. Let's build a beautiful partition. And they built it. 20 years down the road, it fell. Now, the chiddush is that I could compel my neighbor, even if he doesn't have the means to rebuild the wall. I say, I am compelling you to build a wall because I am already used to it. I got used to a certain lifestyle of, especially, let's just make it easier. I built a pool in my backyard. I never would have built a pool if I wouldn't have had a fence. Now I already have a pool in my backyard. You can't just decide not to build a wall. The chiddush of the Mishnah is I only have to build 7.5 feet. Not if the wall was 100 feet or 20 feet, because that's enough for Hezekriya. Okay. So therefore there's no raya. It's only because I got used to it. Frek the Gemara, u'dekarla my karla. Why did you even think that it would be a good raya? Didn't you understand right away a collapsed wall, you can't compare the two? Because collapsed wall is something that you got used to it. So the Gemara answers no. Seifa it's tuchale. The question and understanding is coming on from the end point, which I was bringing out already. We don't obligate you to build a wall higher than Dalet Amas, even though your original wall is more than Dalet Amas, because Dalet Amas is more than enough. Now, Taisus actually brings down, very crucial Taisus. Taisus Dibra Maschel Nafal Shani. It's a very small Taisus. So I think it's worth it to see it. Oh, sorry, the next Taisus. Vidikariloi my karila. Do we have this little Taisus on Ahmed? We have it on the bottom?
Yeah.
Okay, Vidikariloi my karila. Klaimar Pshita the Nafal Shani. It's simple to us that that's the difference. Why would you bring it as a raya? But aderabba, if anything, hayla lechiach mediktani v'nafal mechlal de ba'amal leish mehazik. Because only in a scenario where it fell down and you had a will originally, you must rebuild. If anything, it sounds like originally, I don't have to build. So that's what the Gemara's question. But the Kari law is even more than that. It's not just like Pshita. It's like if anything, you should have brought it a raya the other direction. On that, the Gemara is answering no. You know why I didn't think it was a raya? Because I thought the Mishnah over there is coming to be mechadish to me that I don't need to build it more than 4 amas, even though originally it was more than 4 amas. Because if you look at note 27 and note 28, it's a little difficult to understand how Rashi would be learning it. Mel, would you want to read note 27?
Yeah. Come on. Yeah. Rashi says, we do not explain why the Gemara considers this distinction to be obvious. Tosa suggests that the very fact that the Tana and the Braisa chose to discuss the case of a collapsed wall and not a wall that was initially constructed should have been alerted to the question of the distinction between a collapsed wall and the initial construction.
And I want you to read the parentheses because that's the main point why I wanted to read note 27. The parentheses in that note 27, the ending. The Shita Mekubetzes.
I didn't have that in my phone.
You don't have that? See Shita Mekubetzes? None of you have it?
No, I guess I have an older edition.
No 27 stops right there?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. You also have a Yaakov? Okay.
No, I have it.
So you have a newer Gemara. So the newer article is the punchline that I wanted to bring out. See, I'm gonna say it out loud. See Shita Mekubetzes, who points out that from the answer to the Gemara, we may clearly infer that this was the question. Indeed, this is how Rashi understood it. Because the reason it was bothering me when I was doing this Gemara is what is really the question back and forth? If you're understanding the question like, what were you thinking? You should have known better than Nafal Shani. What's the Gemara's answer of 4 amas? If, however, we understood it the way Taisus was saying, Taisus questions are the way, and this is what the Shita Mekubetzes want to say, everyone understood it like that. It's not a machlekes. Everyone understood the question of the Gemara was, if anything, it was a proof that Hezek Riyah is not Shmei Hezek, because only when it fell. And that the Gemara answers, no. The reason why that Mishnah talks about Nafal to tell you the Chiddush of something else. Then it makes sense the back and forth of the Gemara. But if you understood it, that's where this punchline Shita Mekubetzes was very crucial. Because how else would we understand Rashi? The way that we're learning in note 27, the parentheses, answers it. By telling us, no, even Rashi agrees to Taisus. Because if you're learning the Karila my Karilos, just, what were you thinking? How do you sit like it's almost like a symmetry? How do we answer up? How is it talking to each other, the Gemara's Teretz? But if you're learning the way we're understanding it with Taisus, and the Shita Mekubetzes says everyone agrees to this, it makes much more sense. That the question of the Gemara was, with the Karila my Karila, what were you thinking? Nafal Shani is anything is showing us, Hezek Riyah, Lav Shmez. Gemara says, no, Seifa it's a Chalei. It's not a Raya anyway, maybe. Why? Because it's only coming to tell me a Chiddush, you don't need to build more than 4 amas. But up to 4 amas, we could go any direction. Okay. Now we're going through the 3rd Raya with 4 more Rayas to go. Tashma. Let's bring another Raya, the Hezek Riyah, Lav Shmei Hezek. There's halacha. You should have a diagram in the bottom, which on note 30, note 31 actually.
30.
30, note 30.
31.
31, yeah. Kaifin, so we're going to look at that note to understand what the Gemara's Raya is going to be. That there's a Rishus Rabbim, then there's a shared courtyard. If you look at the at the diagram, right? There's picture a bunch of little houses, and the way they built the wall is very, very smart. They built it on a certain angle that when you're facing the courtyard, you can't see it because when you're facing it, there's nothing to see. So it's like you have to come in a certain angle and then turn. Like that, no one can really see. However, they did have a gate for nothing to do with visual trespassing, rather for security. So let's bring the raya. Kaifin Isai live nice base shard bidelis lechatzer. We compelled each little resident to pay the HOA, right? We all have to pay a little fee for what? To build that shape gate. Not just a gate. Let's call it a gatehouse. We have to build a certain gatehouse, not just a door, a gatehouse. Now, why are you compelling me to build a gatehouse? I don't care if everyone can see in. What do we see from here? Hezek Riyah, Shmei Hezek. Okay, so it's very interesting. Shma Mina Hezek Riyah, Shemei Hezek. Now we're trying to bring a raya the other way around. Okay. The Gemara says, no, Hezeka de Rabim Shani. There we're talking about a public thoroughfare passing through, and this constant people looking in. It's very not pleasant. Everyone agrees that when there's, like I said earlier, this I was trying to tell you, we're going to continue seeing in the Gemara, that no one's arguing if visual trespass is bothersome. It's very not pleasant to live in public. The only questions what we're trying to navigate is a yachid. How crucial, how strong of a taina is it to say, I don't want you looking at me. I want to be able to sit in my backyard and just relax without anybody looking at me. But here we're answering Hezek de Rabim. Since so many people are passing through, everyone is going to agree that there's such a loss of privacy and it's a true loss. Frak the Gemara objects. Udi yachid light? What do you mean? And a person himself is not, it's not, even anybody looking one person looking at me is not pleasant. So the Gemara wants to bring a raya that talks about one person. Tashma. We have a raya in Cholkin Esachatzer. Partners are not compelled to divide a courtyard. Ad Sheba Arba Amas Lazeh Arba Amas Lazeh. You only could compel me to split up my property as long as I have enough of what? 4 amas for each other. If, however, if the field is only 7 amas, you cannot compel me to divide the property. But let's say the courtyard contains more than 8 amas, chalkin, we could divide. My love, we're understanding, chalkin means you have to split it up with the wall, bekaisel. So you clearly see that if once we obligate to split up the property, we must build a wall. Elamai hezek riyah shmei hezek. My answer is loi b'mesepes ba'amal. You would only be mechuyev to put on boundary markers, but you're not mechuyev to build a complete wall. Okay, now we're going to continue with another raya, a 5th raya. Tashma hachaloinos. This is hachaloinos. You have windows. Basically, you want to erect a wall opposite the windows of your neighbor's house. So there's an issue because you're going to build a wall, you're going to be able to see right in. So bein melamala, bein melamata, ubein mekenegdon dalramas means to say is you must have a space between your window and your wall, whether it's the 2nd story, the bottom story, or directly against it. You must have it. Dalaramas. Let's see here. They have a beautiful picture. Maybe we'll buy a few more of these so everyone could look at these. We're going to explain. This is the notes. Let's make sure everyone can see. Here, you're going to build a wall. This is your neighbor who has windows. Do you see Mel from here? Now, the halacha is you need to build a wall. Another 4 amas. Here's the end of the window. Let's call it 8 feet high, the window. You must build it now 12 feet. You know why? In order that you cannot climb on your wall. If you have a 4 amma difference, you can't peek into your guy because the wall is too close that all you're hitting is bricks. The angle, right? That's a good word, the angle. It does make a difference if it's far enough, it's not going to help you. But we're talking about apparently we're trying to protect that angle. Same thing, milamata. How tall is a person? Like we explained, the average person is not more than 7 and 7.5 feet. Therefore, your wall has to be, the bottom has to be a break of 7 and 7.5 feet, that even if you're standing on top of the wall on your tippy toes, you still cannot see with that angle. And mekanegdon, this is not the raya is from these 2 little menchis that are seen, but the raya is mekanegdon kadei shelo yafel. What we're doing is people want sunlight. So you don't want it to block the shade. Therefore, you're going to have the same issue, but the raya is going to be from these two little pick squeaks that are trying to see into the yard. Okay, so what do we see? Let's go through the raya. The Gemara says, "V'tani Allah milamala kadei shalayatzis v'yira." On top, you need to have 4 amas, so you can't take a peek. Milamaton kadei shalayamit, so you can't stand on the wall v'yira. Mikenegdon kadei shalayafil, and against it, in order not to darken the neighbor's home. Windows. You want to live with windows. Imagine, you imagine we had no windows here. It would be very claustrophobic and very stuffy. It's very, windows it's very healthy for us. More answers, no. So we clearly see, so what's the raya? That these little 2 mentions, we see there's a concept of hezek riyah. The more answers, no. Hezeka debayis shani. No one is arguing on hezeka debayis, which means to say is intimate stuff happen in the house. There's plenty of private stuff. We're only arguing in your front yard to bring it out better. It used to be we're only considering this whole Mishnah, this whole chapter is only discussing a front yard where, dependent on your comfort level, what type of activities you're going to do in your front yard. But you're not going to do activities that are totally private, whether it's restroom and all other stuff. No one's arguing that it's out of limits. The question is, could I say, I don't feel comfortable, I want to relax, I want to maybe not, my wife doesn't feel so tznius, etc., in my front yard. That's where the question becomes. But no one's going to argue regarding looking into someone's house, hezeka debayis shani. That's an issue. One last attempt, the 6th proof. And then we might have a few minutes. We're going to quickly do a quick review, if you're interested, just for 5 minutes or less, going through the daf outside. Tashma, let's go through the final proof, and we're going to stop for the day. Da'amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, Omer Shmuel, the name of Shmuel. Gag hasamuch lechatzer chaveirai. You have a roof that's right near your friend, your yard of your friend. The halach is oiselay ma'ake gavaya dalet amas. You must make a ma'ake. Ma'ake means a fence. Now the reason is we all know there's a halacha of ma'ake, which is in the Torah. It talks about when you build a roof, you have to.
Parapet wall.
Pardon?
Parapet wall.
What's it called?
Parapet.
Yeah, you build a deck, you have to have a fence.
You have to have a fence, right? But how many tefachim do you need in the Al-Pi the Torah? Not Dalet Amas, 10 tefachim. Otherwise, there's no right. 10 tefachim is for the danger, right? So Dalet Amas is showing you too much. So why do you need Dalet Amas? Elamai, Mel, you need Dalet Amas for hezek riyah. So in order, when you're not on the roof, you can't peek in your neighbor, right? You already have a roof, and you.
Wow.
So we see hezekah is a real hezek. More answers, no. Shani yasam. There it's different. Da'amale balachatzel balagag. Lididi kviali tashmishi. I'm always in my courtyard doing activities. Lididach like kvialach tashmishtach. Which means to say, you don't use your roof as a recreational backyard. You're there because you could go up there. Therefore, I have no way of knowing when you're up on the roof. Maybe you're creeping up on the roof of me. So I can conceal from you and not do certain stuff. In a shared yard, what happens is we both have, we both see each other. And we both understand it's not too much realistic to do private activities in between the yards. Okay, we're going to stop here for the daf. We're going to continue Lishna Achrina.